It was just another quiet evening at the gas station in Hollow Pines. Mira Rowan was behind the counter tending to her usual tasks, when the roar of motorcycle engines broke the peace. The Shadow Reapers had arrived, a biker gang infamous for their violence and intimidation. At first they seemed like any other group passing through, but their true colors surfaced when one of them started harassing an older customer. "Move it, old man," one biker growled, his tone dripping with menace. The older man, defiant despite his age, refused to back down. "Maybe you should learn some manners," he replied, his voice calm but firm. That was all it took. The gang erupted into taunts and threats, their aggression filling the small station like a storm. Mira couldn't stand by and watch. Stepping forward, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her, she said, "Leave him alone." The bikers turned their attention to her, their smirks widening. What they saw was a young woman they assumed would be easy to intimidate. What they didn't know was that her father, a quiet, unassuming truck driver, was more dangerous than they could imagine. This is the story of how one woman's courage and her father's hidden past collided, to take on a ruthless gang. What happens next will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and if you enjoy tales of courage and justice, don't forget to subscribe to BlackQueen Fightback. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. The small town of Hollow Pines woke to the soft hum of truck engines and the faint scent of pine drifting through the crisp morning air. Life in this quiet corner of the world moved at a slower pace, where people greeted each other by name, and the main street was lined with mom-and-pop shops that hadn't changed in decades. In the heart of it all was a modest gas station where Mira Ellison worked tirelessly to help her father, Elias Rowan, keep the family business running. Mira, with her chestnut hair tied back in a ponytail and a smudge of grease on her cheek, was no stranger to hard work at 22. She was the backbone of the station, balancing the books, fixing pumps, and chatting with the regulars who stopped by to anyone passing through. She might seem like just another small-town girl, but to those who knew her, Mia was as tough and determined as they came, a trait she'd inherited from her father. Elias was a towering figure, both physically and metaphorically. His broad shoulders and weathered face told the story of years spent on the road hauling freight across the country. He was her hero, a man who had always been there for her, even after her mother passed away when she was a child. What she didn't know, what few in Hollow Pines knew, was that Elias Rowan had a past he'd carefully tucked away, a past that had left its marks not just on his body, but on his soul. The day started like any other. Mira unlocked the station, greeted by the familiar chime of the doorbell. She wiped down the counter's stacked bags of chips near the register and flipped the switch on the coffee machine. The first few customers trickled in, truckers grabbing a quick cup of joe before hitting the road, and locals picking up their morning papers. As the sun climbed higher, the familiar rumble of motorcycles broke through the tranquility. Mira glanced out the window, her brow furrowing, as a group of bikers rolled into the parking lot. Their leather jackets gleamed under the sunlight, each emblazoned with the snarling wolf emblem of the Shadow Reapers, a notorious gang known for causing trouble in nearby towns. Mira felt a flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. "Stay calm," she muttered to herself, straightening her apron as the bikers dismounted their bikes. The leader, a wiry man with a scar running down his cheek, sauntered into the station, his boots clinking against the tiled floor behind him. Two other gang members followed, their expressions a mix of amusement and menace. "Morning," Mira said evenly, her voice steady, despite the tension crackling in the air. The leader didn't respond, immediately, his cold eyes scanning the station before landing on her. "Nice place you got here," he drawled, his tone laced with mockery. Mira's jaw tightened. "Can I help you with something?" Before the man could reply, the doorbell chimed again, and an older man entered. It was Mr. Hiram D.N.E., our tired trucker who was a regular at the station. Hiram nodded at me, oblivious to the bikers, as he made his way to the coffee machine. The leader's gaze shifted to Hiram, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "Hey, old man," he called out, "you going to pay for my coffee?" Hiram glanced over his shoulder, his face creasing in confusion. "Excuse me," one of the bikers stepped forward, grabbing a cup and slamming it onto the counter. "He's asking if you're going to be a gentleman and buy our coffee." Grandpa. Mira felt her pulse quicken. "That's enough," she said firmly, stepping between Hiram and the bikers. The leader raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by her boldness. "Oh, look at this," he said, smirking at his crew. "We've got ourselves a little hero." The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with the unspoken threat. Mara stood her ground, her eyes never leaving the leaders. "If you're not here to buy something, I suggest you leave for a moment." It seemed like he might take a step back, but then he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You've got guts, girl. I'll give you that, but you might want to think twice before sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Mira didn't flinch, even as the leader's words hung heavy in. There she had faced her share of difficult customers before, but this felt different. The bikers weren't just here to intimidate, they wanted to make a statement. You heard her, a firm voice cut through the tension. Marrera turned to see Hiram Dne standing, taller now despite the gray in his hair. He placed a firm hand on the counter. "She asked you to leave. Why don't you show some manners and do just that?" The bikers erupted into mocking laughter, their sneers filling the small station. One of them, a burly man with a shaved head, leaned closer to Hiram, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Manners, is that what they teach you old-timers these days?" Before Mirror could intervene, the doorbell chimed again, and this time, it was Alias Rowan who stepped in. His towering presence seemed to fill the room, his gaze sharp as it took in the scene. He didn't speak right away, but the room seemed to shift with his arrival. "Hiram," said, relief evident in his tone. The leader of the bikers, Draven Locke, turned slowly, his amused grin faltering as he sized up Elias. "And who's this?" "Another hero." Alias met Draven's gaze, Heist's expression unreadable. "I'm just here from my daughter," he said evenly, his voice calm but firm. Mira felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. Draven's grin returned, more sinister. "This time your daughter, huh?" He looked at Mia, then back at Elias. "I guess being a little rude runs in the family." Elias stepped forward, his boots clicking against the tiled floor. He stopped just a few feet from Draven, his eyes never wavering. "I suggest you and your friends move along," he said, his voice low but calm, demanding. The room fell silent for a moment, the tension almost suffocating. "Thou do not think specifically, especially not in this house. We don't take orders. We give them." Elias's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he glanced at Mara. "Go outside." Mara hesitated, not wanting to leave her father alone with the bikers, but the look in his eyes told her this wasn't a request. Reluctantly, she stepped around the counter and moved toward the door, her heart pounding. As soon as the door closed behind her, she pulled out her phone and dialed the local sheriff's office. The bikers might not have been violent yet, but Mara wasn't about to take any chances inside. Elias stood his ground, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "This is your last warning," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Leave now, or you'll regret staying." Draven smirked, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who looked like they'd spent more time behind a wheel than in a fight. "Come on, Draven," one of the bikers muttered. "This isn't worth it." Draven shot him a glare but didn't respond. Instead, he took a step closer to Elias, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You think you're tough, don't you? But you don't know who you're messing with." Elias didn't blink. "Neither do you." The standoff was broken by the distant sound of sirens. Draven's eyes narrowed and he glanced out the window. Mara stood there, her phone in hand, her expression defiant. "Let's go." Draven barked, his voice sharp. The bikers hesitated for a moment before following his lead, their boots thewing against the floor as they walked out. Draven paused at the door, turning back to Elias. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and venomous. Alias didn't respond, his gaze steady as he watched them mount their bikes and roar out of the parking lot. Only when the sound of their engines faded did he let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Mayo hurried back inside, her eyes wide with concern. "Are you okay?" Elias nodded, his expression unreadable. "They're gone for now." Hiram placed a reassuring hand on Maya's shoulder. "You did good, kid. Calling the sheriff was smart." Marrera glanced at her father, a knot of worry tightening in her chest. She could tell this wasn't the end of it. The look in Elias's eyes said as much outside. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of pine. The tranquility of hollow pines had been shaken, and deep down Mira knew things were about to get a lot more complicated. The next morning, Hollow Pines felt unusually tense. News of the incident at the gas station spread quickly through the tight-knit community. Regular customers stopped by not only for gas or coffee, but to check on Mira and Elias. Despite the reassurances Mira gave them, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling lingering in her chest. Elias, on the other hand, was calm, too calm. He moved through his tasks with his usual efficiency, but Moreira noticed the way his eyes constantly flicked toward the door, the way his hand hovered near his waist, as if expecting trouble. By midday, the tension broke. The low rumble of motorcycle engines echoed down the street, growing louder with each passing second. Mira felt her stomach drop as the same group of bikers rolled into the parking lot, their arrival as deliberate as a storm cloud. This time they didn't come inside. Draven and his crew stayed outside, leaning against their bikes and laughing among themselves. It was clear they were waiting for what Mira didn't know. Stay here, Elias said, his voice steady but firm. He stepped outside, his movements deliberate as he walked toward the group. Draven was the first to notice, him a sly grin spreading across his face. Well, if it isn't the hero from yesterday," he called out. Pushing off his bike, Aya stopped a few feet away, his posture relaxed but his eyes locked on Draven. "You've made your point," he said, evenly. "Now it's time to move on." Draven chuckled, glancing at his crew. "Move on? We just got comfortable." One of the bikers, Corbin Jett, a burly man with tattoos snaking up his neck, stepped forward. "What's the rush, old man? Don't you like having company? I'm not looking for trouble." Elias said, his tone calm but firm. "But if you're looking for it, you'll find more than you can handle." The laughter among the bikers died down, replaced by a tense silence. Draven's grin faltered for a moment before returning sharper. "This time, H, is that a threat?" "It's advice," at last replied before Draven could respond. The sound of a car door slamming drew their attention. Moreira had stepped outside, her arms crossed, and her expression defiant. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice steady. Despite the fear knotting in her stomach, Draven turned to her, his grin widening. "The little hero joins the fight." How touching. Elias took a step closer. To Draven, his voice dropping. "You leave her out of this." Draven's grin faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "You've got guts, old man," he said, his tone low, but guts only get you so far. The biker mounted their bikes, the engines roaring to life as they pulled out of the parking lot. Draven called over his shoulder, "We'll be seeing you." Elias watched them go, his jaw tight. Moreira stepped closer to him, her voice soft. "Dad, what are we going to do?" Elias didn't answer right away. His eyes remained on the empty street, his thoughts racing. Finally he turned to Mia, his expression serious. "We're going to be ready the rest of the day," passed in uneasy silence. Moreira tried to focus on her tasks, but every sound, the hum of the coffee machine, the clang of the fuel pump seemed to echo too loudly in her ears. Elias busied himself in the garage, his movements deliberate as he rummaged through a locked storage chest. Mira couldn't help but notice how much time he spent there. When curiosity got the better of her, she peeked into the garage. To see what he was doing, Elias had a small duffel bag open on the workbench, its contents neatly arranged. Mira's breath hitched as she caught sight of a sleek black pistol and several magazines of ammunition. "Dad," she said, stepping into the room. "What is all this?" Elias didn't look up, carefully inspecting the weapon. "In his hands, just a precaution," he said evenly. "A precaution." Mira's voice. "Rose, this isn't normal." "Dad, what's going on? Why do you even have that?" Elias set the pistol down and turned to face her, his expression calm but serious. "Mira, I told you we need to be ready. Those men aren't going to just walk away, and when they come back, we need to protect ourselves." Moreira crossed her arms, her frustration bubbling over. "I get that, but where? Did you even learn to do this? You're a truck driver, not..." He stopped mid-sentence as realization dawned. Pieces of her father's past that he'd kept hidden for years began to fall into place. You're not just a truck driver, are you? Elias sighed, leaning against the workbench. Not always, he admitted, a long time ago before you were born. I served in the military special operations. Mira's eyes widened. Special operations like combat missions. He nodded. I've done things I'm not proud of, Marrera things I don't talk about. But those skills kept me alive then, and they're going to keep us safe now. Marrera opened her mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the distant rumble of engines. Her stomach dropped as she realized the sound was coming closer. They're back, she whispered. Elias moved quickly, grabbing the pistol and tucking it into the waistband of his jeans. Stay inside, he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mara hesitated, her heart pounding. What are you going to do, whatever I have? Aya said simply before stepping out of the garage outside. The Shadow Reapers had returned their bikes, lined up in a menacing row at the edge of the gas station lot. Draven dismounted, first his boots crunching against the gravel as he strode toward Elias. You don't learn, do you? Do you? Draven said, his voice dripping with mockery. Elias didn't respond immediately. He stood in the middle of the lot, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. You've had your fun, he said calmly. It's time to move on, Draven smirked, gesturing to his crew. You think you're in a position to tell us what to do? The bikers laughed, their voices echoing in the stillness of the late afternoon. Corbin Jett stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. I think the old man needs another lesson in respect. Draven raised a hand, silencing his crew. Not yet, let's give him one last chance to back down. He turned back to Ellis, his grin widening. What do you say, old man? Ready to apologize? Elias took a slow step forward, his gaze never leaving. Draven, I don't apologize to bullies. The smirk on Draven's face faded, replaced by a glint of anger. Wrong answer. Before anyone could move, the faint wail of sirens cut through the air. The bikers turned toward the sound, their expressions darkening. Draven cursed under his breath. This isn't over, he snarled before signaling to his crew. The Shadow Reapers mounted their bikes and roared away their engines. Fading into the distance, Elias stood still, watching them go. Marrera stepped out of the garage, her face pale. They're not going to stop, are they? Elias shook his head. No, he said quietly. They're not. That evening, Marrera sat in the kitchen, the weight of the day pressing heavily on her shoulders. Elias was outside, pacing along the perimeter of the gas station. Every so often she heard the faint sound of his footsteps crunching on the gravel. She stared at the untouched dinner on the table. Her appetite long gone, the air in the station felt thicker than usual, charged with a tension Mara couldn't shake. Every creak of the building, every faint rustle of the wind made her jump. She had never seen her father like this before, so focused, so prepared for a fight that seemed inevitable. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the lot. Marrera stood and peeked through the window, her heart skipping a beat. It wasn't the bikers this time, it was a familiar face. Hiram. Danny Elias approached Ham's truck as he climbed out, a shotgun resting in his hand. I figured you might need some help, Hiram said, his voice steadied. Despite the tension in the air, I appreciate it. Elias replied, glancing at the shotgun, but this isn't your fight. Hiram shook his head. If those guys come back, it'll be everyone's fight. I've seen enough bullies in my day to know they don't stop unless you make them a step outside. Her voice tinged with concern. Hiram, you don't have to do this. The older man smiled warmly at her. Someone's got to look out for you and your dad. Besides, I've got a feeling he knows what he's doing. Ellis didn't respond to the compliment, but his expression softened ever so slightly. We need to be ready, he said, gesturing toward the station. MEA, grab the emergency lights. If they cut the power, we'll need to see what's going on. Maya nodded and hurried inside, her pulse quickening as she rummaged through the storage closet. Her thoughts raced. The idea of a confrontation with the Shadow Reapers felt surreal, like something out of a movie. But the look in her father's eyes told her this was very real and very dangerous. Outside, Elias and Hiram began setting up defensive perimeter. Hiram positioned himself near the back of the station, keeping watch on the darkened alley that led to the lot. Elias stayed near the front, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The minutes stretched into an hour, the silence broken only by the occasional chirp of crickets. Marrera joined her father at the front, Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "What's the plan if they come back?" she asked softly. "We handle it." Elias replied, his voice steady. "Handle it." Helmaror pressed Dad. "I need to know what's going on. I can't just stand here and wait." Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. "We're going to keep them from hurting anyone," he said finally. "That's all you need to know." Before could respond, the distant rumble of engines reached their ears. The sound grew louder, more distinct as headlights appeared in the distance. "They're here," Hiram called out from the back. Elias turned to Mira, his voice low but firm. "Stay inside, lock the doors, no." Myra said, her voice trembling but determined. "I'm not leaving." Elias's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. "Stay close then and do exactly as I say." The Shadow Reapers rolled into the lot like a pack of wolves, their bikes forming a semicircle near the pumps. Draven dismounted first, his grin as sharp as a blade. "You've got guts, old man," he called out, his voice carrying over the hum of engines. "But guts only get you so far." Elias stepped forward, his posture calm but commanding. "You've made your point now. Now it's time to leave." Draven laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Leave? Oh, we're not going anywhere. In fact, we were thinking about sticking around for a while, maybe make this our new hangout spot." The bikers chuckled, their voices echoing in the still night. Elias's gaze didn't waver. "This isn't going to end the way you think it will." Draven's smirk faltered for a moment before he gestured to one of his crew. The biker dismounted, pulling a crowbar from his bike. "Let's show him what happens when people don't play." "Nice," Draven said coldly before the biker could take a step. Elias moved with a speed that seemed impossible for someone his size. He closed the distance and grabbed the crowbar mid-swing, twisting it out of the man's hand. The biker stumbled back, stunned, as Elias tossed the crowbar to the ground. "Last warning," Elias said, his voice like steel. For a moment, the lot was silent, the bikers exchanging uncertain glances. Then Draven stepped forward, his expression dark. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life," he snarled. The Shadow Reapers regrouped, their laughter replaced with a simmering tension. The biker who had lost his crowbar stumbled back to his crew, nursing in his wrist and casting a hateful glare at Elias. Draven Locke stood at the center of the pack, his piercing eyes locked on Elias's smirk, now a mask hiding his growing frustration. "You're quick for an old man," Draven said, his voice cutting through the night. "But you don't seem to understand who you're dealing with." Elias didn't flinch. I understand perfectly," he replied calmly. "You're just another group of bullies who think the world owes them something." Draven's expression hardened, the grin slipping from his face. He turned to his crew and barked an order. "Bring the truck." The bikers exchanged surprised glances before one of them nodded and walked over to a large black truck parked near the edge of the lot. The engine roared to life, its headlights piercing the darkness as rolled toward the gas station. "What are they doing?" Morrow whispered, her voice trembling as she stood behind Elias. Elias didn't answer. Immediately, his eyes narrowed as he watched the truck come to a stop. Near one of the fuel pumps, the driver Corbinjet leaned out the window with a sneer. "Here's the deal," Draven said, stepping closer to Elias. "We're going to fill up and you're going to pay for it. Consider it our fee for letting this place stay." Standing, Elias took a step forward, his voice steady. "You're not putting a drop of gas in that truck. Now get out of here before this gets worse for you." Draven chuckled, his hand drifting to the chain hanging from his belt. "I think we've been patient enough." He raised his voice, addressing his crew. "Show them what happens when people don't play nice." At his command, several bikers dismounted their motorcycle, their movement deliberate as they spread out across the lot. One of them, a wiry man with a crow tat on his neck, pulled a switchblade from his pocket and flicked it open. Mira's breath caught in her throat, and she instinctively moved closer to Elias' dad. "We need to call the sheriff," she whispered urgently. "We don't have time." Elias replied, his voice low but firm. He turned his head slightly toward her. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't get involved." The bikers advanced, slowly, their footsteps crunching on the gravel. Hiram Dan, still stationed at the back of the station, stepped into view, his shotgun held at the ready. "I wouldn't take another step if I were you," he called out, his voice steady. Despite The tension Draven turned toward Hiram, his smirk returning. Oh, look at this, the cavalry's here. Tell me, old man, do you really think that pea shooter is going to scare us? It's not meant to scare you, Hiram replied evenly. It's meant to stop you, the tension. In the lot reached its breaking point as the bikers hesitated, their bravado wavering in the face of Ham's unyielding stance. For a moment it seemed as though the situation might de-escalate. Then Corbin Jett slammed his foot on the truck's accelerator, the tires screeching as the vehicle lurched forward. Alias moved in an instant. Grabbing Mira's arm, he pulled her out of the way just as the truck barreled toward the fuel pump. The vehicle came toe-screeching halt, its front bumper just inches from the metal column. You idiots, Elias shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. You'll blow this place sky high if you're not careful. Draven laughed, his eyes gleaming with sadistic amusement. Maybe that's the idea, he said. Hiram tightened his grip on the shotgun, his finger hovering near the trigger. You've got 5 seconds to back off or this ends here. He warned. The bikers froze, their eyes dotting between Hiram and Alias. Even Draven seemed to hesitate for a moment, the threat of an armed confrontation making him reconsider. Fine, Draven said finally, raising his hands in mock surrender. We'll go. But this isn't over. The bikers slowly retreated, their glares promising future trouble as they mounted their bikes and roared out of the lot. The black truck followed, its taillights disappearing into the distance as the sound of engines faded. Elias let out a slow breath. Is everyone okay? He asked, his eyes scanning the lot. Mira nodded. Sheer heart still pounding. Hiram lowered the shotgun, his hands trembling slightly. For now, he said. But they'll be back, you know that, right? Elias nodded grimly. Ich know, and we'll be ready. The gas station was quiet again, but the tension lingered. Like a storm cloud, Marrera sat at the small table in the back room, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee she had no intention of drinking. Elias stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the pale glow of the streetlight outside. They're going to come back, aren't they? Mara finally said, breaking the silence. Elias didn't turn around. Yes, he replied simply. Marrera felt her stomach turn. Then why are we still here? Why not pack up and leave before things get worse? Elias turned to face her. Heiss expression. Calm but resolute, because running doesn't solve anything. If we leave, they'll just find someone else to bully, someone who might not be able to stand up to them. Marrera opened her mouth to argue but found herself at a loss for words. As much as she hated the idea of staying, she couldn't deny the truth in her father's words. A knock at the back door startled them both. Elias moved quickly, motioning for Mior to stay put. As he approached the door, he opened it cautiously to find Hiram standing there, his shotgun slung over his shoulder and a determined look on his face. I thought I told you this wasn't your fight, Elias said, though there was no malice in his tone. Hiram shrugged. Maybe not, but it's my town. I'm not going to let those punks ruin it. Alias stepped aside to let him in. I hope you know what you're getting yourself into. Hiram gave a wry smile. I've been through worse. The hours dragged on, the three of them preparing for the inevitable. Elias showed Marrera how to secure the doors and windows while Hiram kept watch outside. They didn't know when the Shadow Reapers would return, but the air felt heavy with anticipation around midnight. The low rumble of engines shattered the fragile silence. Mira's heart leapt into her throat as she looked out the window. The Shadow Reapers were back there, motorcycles forming a menacing line at the edge of Thelot. This time they weren't alone. A second truck rolled in behind them, its cargo bed packed with supplies. Draven dismounted his bike, his movements deliberate as he surveyed the station. Elias stepped outside, his stance steady as he faced the group. Hiram followed, his shotgun at the ready. Marrera hesitated for a moment before joining them, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. Well, Draven said, his voice carrying over the hum of the engine's looks. Like the whole family is here for the show. Alias didn't respond. He let the silence hang, forcing Draven to fill it. We've been talking. Draven continued, gesturing to his crew, and we've decided it's time to settle this. No more games. No more warnings. What do you want? Elias asked, his voice calm but firm. Draven's grin widened. Your station, your truck, everything you've got, you hand it over, and maybe we'll let you and your little girl walk away. Mira bristled at the comment, but Elias placed a steadying hand. On her shoulder, you're not getting anything. Eli said, Draven's expression. Darkened wrong answer. He snapped his fingers and two bikers moved toward the truck, pulling out heavy chains and bats. Hiram raised the shotgun, his voice cutting through the tension. That's far enough. The bikers hesitated, their eyes flicking between Hiram and Draven. Draven smirked. You think that thing's going to stop us? We don't. You find out. Hiram shot back, his finger steady on the trigger. Before Draven could respond, Elias stepped forward enough, he said, his voice commanding. You've made your point now, it's my turn. Elias's movements were a blur as he disarmed one of the bikers, grabbing a bat and using it to knock the chains out of another's hands. The sudden show of force took the group by surprise, and for a moment chaos erupted. Hiram fired a warning shot into the air, the sound reverberating through the lot. The bikers froze, their confidence shaken. This ends now, Elias said, his voice cutting through the noise. You leave and you won't come back. Draven's face twisted with rage, but he didn't make a move. The bikers were outmatched, and he knew it. This isn't over. He spat, retreating toward his bike. You'll regret this. Elias stood his ground as the Shadow Reapers retreated, their threats hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break as the last of the engines faded into the distance. Marera turned to her father, her voice trembling. What happens now? Elias didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the empty road, his expression unreadable. We prepare for whatever comes next. The hours after the bikers left were a blur of activity. Elias and Hiram worked tirelessly to fortify the station, moving heavy equipment to block vulnerable entrances and double-checking every window and door. Mira followed their lead, though her hands trembled as she carried supplies. You don't have to stay out here, Elias said, glancing at her as he positioned a steel barrel near the back door. Go inside and rest. I'm not leaving you, Mira replied firmly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Eli sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. This isn't how I wanted you to find out about my past. Mira hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. You don't have to explain right now. Just promise me you'll come out of this, okay? Elias didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said more than words ever could. By dawn, the station was as fortified as it could be. Hiram brewed a pot of coffee, the strong aroma cutting through the tension. We've done what we can, he said, handing Marera a cup. Now we wait. The waiting was the worst part. Hours ticked by with no sign of the bikers, but the knowledge that they could return at any moment hung over them like a dark cloud. Elias checked his pistol repeatedly, his fingers tightening around the grip as he watched the road. Then, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the sound they had been dreading echoed through the air. The deep guttural roar of motorcycle engines. Myra froze, a hair coffee slipping from her hands and shattering on the floor. Elias was on his feet. In an instant, his movement swift and calculated. They're here, he said, his voice calm but firm. Hiram, get to the back and cover the alley. Mia, stay close to me. Outside, the Shadow Reapers lined up, their bikes in a semicircle, blocking the station from the main road. Draven stepped forward, his leather jacket glinting in the fading light. This time he wasn't smiling. You had your chance, he called out, his voice cold and menacing. Now we do this my way. Elias stepped out onto the lot, Mira just behind him. Hiram appeared at the corner of the building, his shotgun trained on the group. You're making a mistake, Elias said, his voice steady. Walk away while you still can. Raven bet a laugh. The only mistake here is yours. You should have just handed over the keys. Now we're going to take everything, and make sure you never stand in our way again. He snapped his fingers, and the bikers sprang into action. Half of them dismounted, advancing toward the station with chains, bats, and crowbars in hand. The others revved their engine, creating a deafening roar meant to intimidate. Mira's heart raced as the first biker swung a chain at Elias. Her father moved with a precision she had never seen before, Sid stepping the attack and disarming his opponent in one fluid motion. The chain clattered to the ground. As Elias turned to face the next threat, Hiram fired a warning shot into the air, the blast momentarily freezing the bikers in their tracks. Back off, he shouted, his voice ringing with authority. But Draven wasn't deterred. He gestured for his crew to keep going, his eyes locked on Elias. Take him down. The lot erupted into chaos. Elias moved like a seasoned warrior, his years of training evident in every calculated step and strike. He dodged Aswing from a crowbar, countering with a swift punch that sent the biker sprawling. Marrera ducked behind a stack of barrels, her heart pounding as she watched her. Her father fend off multiple attackers at once. She wanted to help but knew she would only get in the way from his position near the alley. Harass kept the bikers at bay with well-placed warning shots, his aim steady despite the chaos. "Stay back," he shouted as two bikers tried to flank him. "I've got enough shells for all of you," Draven, meanwhile, circled the lot like a predator, his eyes never leaving Elias. He waited for the perfect moment to strike, his hand tightening around the heavy chain he carried as Elias disarmed another biker. Draven made his move. He lunged forward, swinging the chain with all his strength. Elias barely had time to react. Raising his arm to block the blow, the chain wrapped around his forearm, the force of the impact driving him back a step. Draven grinned triumphantly. "Not so tough now, are you?" Elias didn't answer with a sharp tug. He yanked the chain from Draven's hands. His movement swift and precise. The leader of the Shadow Reapers stumbled momentarily, thrown off balance. Elias advanced, his voice low and steady. "You picked the wrong fight." Elias swung the chain in a wide arc, forcing Draven to step back. The leader of the Shadow Reapers spat on the ground, his smirk replaced with a snarl. "You think you're better than us, old men?" He taunted, his voice thick with venom. "I don't think." Elias replied coldly. "I know." Draven lunged again, his movements wild but determined. Elias sidestepped the attack with precision, using the chain to knock Draven's legs out from under him. The biker hit the ground hard, a grunt of pain escaping his lips. The rest of the gang hesitated, their confidence wavering, as they watched their leader struggle. "Get him." One of them shouted, but their movements were less certain now, their bravado cracking under the pressure. Marrera peeked out from her hiding spot, their heart pounding as the scene unfolded. She saw Elias standing tall, his posture unyielding, despite the chaos around him. But she also saw the other bikers regrouping, their numbers still overwhelming. Despite their hesitation, Hiram's voice cut through the noise. "Mira, get inside and call the sheriff again." Mara nodded, scrambling toward the station's back door. As she ran, a biker broke away from the group, his eyes locking onto her. He sprinted after her, his footsteps heavy on the gravel. "Mia," Elias shouted, his voice filled with urgency. She reached the door just as the biker closed in. With trembling hands, she slammed it shut and locked it. Her breath coming in short gasps, the biker pounded on the door, his shouts muffled by the thick wood inside. Marrera grabbed the phone and dialed the sheriff's office, her finger shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the receiver. The operator's calm voice on the other end helped steady her. "We're already on our way," the operator said. "Hold tight." Marrera hung up her hands, still trembling, as she pressed her back against the door outside. The fight continued to rage. Elias turned his attention back to the bikers. His focus razor sharp, another attacker lunged at him, wielding a crowbar. Elias dodged the swing and countered with a swift kick to the man's knee, sending him collapsing to the ground. Draven, still on the ground, gritted his teeth as he pushed himself to his feet, his eyes burned with rage as he grabbed a discarded bat and charged at Elias again. This time Elis met him head-on. The sound of striking metal echoed across the lot as their weapons collided. Draven swung wildly, but Elias's movements were calculated and efficient. He sidestepped each blow, waiting for an opening when it came. He didn't hesitate. Elias twisted the bat out of Draven's hands and delivered a sharp blow to his ribs, forcing the biker to stumble back with a cry of pain. The other bikers froze, their confidence shattered as they watched their leader fall. Hiram, still holding the shotgun, took a step forward, his voice steady. "Anyone else want to try their luck?" For a moment there was silence, then slowly the bikers began retreating, their steps hesitant. Draven clutched his side, as breathing ragged. He glared at Elias, his voice hoarse with anger. "This isn't over," he spat. "You're going to regret this." OAS took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "The only thing I regret is letting you walk away. But if you ever come back here, you won't be so lucky." Draven's glare didn't waver, but he didn't argue. He gestured to his crew, and they mounted their bikes one by one. The roar of engines filled the air as the Shadow Reapers retreated, their taillights disappearing into the night. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Hiram lowered the shotgun, his shoulders sagging with relief. I didn't think they'd actually leave. He admitted Elias didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed on the road long after the bikers were gone, as if expecting them to turn around. Finally, he let out a slow breath and turned to Hyam. They're not gone on for good, but we've bought ourselves some time inside the station. Mira watched through the window, her heart still racing, when Elias and Hiram stepped inside. She ran to her father, throwing her arms around him. "You're okay?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ellis held her tightly, his voice soft. "We're okay for now." But as he looked out the window at the empty road, a shadow crossed his face. He knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. The gas station was quiet once again, but the tension lingered like a heavy fog. Elias stood near the counter, his eyes scanning. The lot outside, Morera sat in a chair nearby, her knees pulled up to her chest. Aram leaned against the wall, reloading his shotgun with deliberate precision. "Do you think they'll come back?" Mir finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias didn't answer right away. He turned to Hiram, his expression grim. "What do you think?" Hyam let out a slow sigh, snapping the barrel of the shotgun closed. "Men like Draven don't take defeat lightly." He's angry, humiliated. That's a dangerous combination. Myra shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "What do we do if they come back?" Elias crossed the room and knelt in front of her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "We'll deal with it, Morera, just like we did tonight, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Mira nodded, though her fear was evident in her eyes. "I trust you, Dad. I don't want to lose you." "You won't, Leah," promised, his voice steady before anyone could say more. The faint sound of sirens reached their ears. Relief washed over Morera as the red and blue lights of the sheriff's vehicles appeared in the distance. The sheriff, a stout man with a noon's demeanor, stepped out of his car and surveyed the scene. His deputies followed, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "What the hell happened here?" the sheriff asked, his gaze shifting between Elias H. and the remnants of the confrontation. Discarded chains, a bent crowbar, and tire marks scorched into the gravel. "Shadow Reapers," Elias said simply. "They came looking for trouble." The sheriff muttered a curse under his breath. "We've been chasing those bastards for months. They've caused problems in 3 counties, but we haven't been able to pin anything serious on them. They're not done," Hiram said, stepping forward. "They'll be back." The sheriff frowned, his eyes narrowing. "Not if I can help it. We'll set up patrols around here. Keep an eye on things. Y'all need to wait. The act of conflict is the act of progressive effort." The sheriff looked at him, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Elias hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Draven won't stop until he gets what he wants. He's not just a thug, he's a manipulator. He'll regroup and he'll come back stronger." The sheriff studied Eliash's expression, unreadable. "You seem to know a lot about how people like him operate." Aliyah didn't flinch. "I've seen men like Draven before. I know how they think." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Then I guess we'll need your help." The next day dawned with a new and easy calm. The sheriff's patrol car was parked near the gas station, a visible deterrent to anyone considering causing trouble. Morera worked the counter, her smile forced as she greeted customers. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on her, but she did her best to keep things normal. Elias, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. He spent the morning checking the station's defense, his movements methodical and deliberate. Hiram stayed nearby, his shotgun never far from reach. By midday, the sheriff returned with an update. "We've tracked their movements," he said. "It looks like they've retreated to their usual hideout, a warehouse on the outskirts of town." Elias's jaw tightened. "What's your plan?" "We're putting together a raid," the sheriff replied. "If we can catch them with enough evidence, we can take them down for good." "Let me help." "Eli," said the sheriff, raised an eyebrow. "You've done enough already. Let us handle it." Elias shook his head. "You'll need someone who knows how they think, someone who's not afraid to face them." Head on, the sheriff hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you follow my lead." That evening, as the patrol cars rolled out toward the warehouse, Elias glanced back at Mira. "Stay here," he told her. "This is the safest place for you." Mira grabbed his hand, her grip firm. "Be careful, Dad." Elias nodded, a small but reassuring smile. Crossing his face always, the convoy disappeared into the night, leaving Mia and Hyam to keep watch at the station. The silence that followed was heavy, but Mia clung to the hope that this would finally bring an end to the Shadow Reaper's reign. After the convoy of patrol cars moved swiftly through the darkened streets, their headlights cutting sharp beams into the night inside the lead vehicle, Elias sat beside the sheriff, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The warehouse was only a few miles outside Hollow Pines, nestled in a desolate industrial park. "When we get there, you let my deputies handle the confrontation," the sheriff said, glancing at Elias. "I don't want this turning into a bloodbath." Elias gave a curt nod but didn't reply. His thoughts were already racing through the possibilities, anticipating Draven's next move. The Shadow Reapers wouldn't go down without a fight, and Elias knew all too well how dangerous a cornered man could be. As the patrol cars neared the warehouse, they killed their lights and parked in a semicircle, using the surrounding trees for cover. The officers moved into position, their weapons drawn, but their steps cautious. Elias followed close behind, his senses heightened from his vantage point. Elias could see the bikers gathered inside the warehouse. The glow of a bonfire cast flickering shadows on the walls, and the rumble of motorcycles idling in the background underscored the tension in the air. Draven stood at the center, gesturing wildly as he barked orders to his crew. The sheriff motioned for his deputies to fan out, preparing to close in, but before they could move, a figure emerged from the shadows near the edge of the lot. It was one of the bikers stepping outside for a smoke. His eyes widened as he spotted the patrol car's cops. He shouted, his voice slicing through the night. Chaos erupted inside the warehouse as the Shadow Reapers scrambled to prepare for the raid. Draven's voice boomed over the commotion. "Arm up. Don't let them take us," the sheriff cursed under his breath, signaled for his deputies to move in. Go, go, go." Aaliyah stayed close to the sheriff as they approached the warehouse. Gunfire rang out sharp and deafening as the bikers tried to hold their ground, but the deputies were well trained, their tactics methodical as they advanced. Elias ducked behind a stack of crates, scanning the chaos for Draven. He spotted the gang leader near the back of the warehouse, clutching a rifle. As he barked orders, Elias's jaw tightened. He had to end this before anyone else got hurt without waiting for the sheriff's signal. Elias moved. He darted through the fray with the precision of a soldier, dodging debris and bullets as he closed in on Draven. Draven saw him coming and raised the rifle, but Elias was faster. He lunged forward, knocking the weapon aside and sending it skittering across the floor. "You again," Draven sneered, swinging a feast-at. Elias blocked the punch and countered with a swift strike to Draven's jaw, sending the gang leader stumbling backward. "It's over," Elias said, his voice cold and final. Draven wiped the blood from his mouth, his eyes blazing with defiance. "You don't get it, old man. Guys like me don't just give up." Elias stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Guys like you always fall." The question is how hard. Before Draven could respond, the sheriff and 2 deputies arrived, their weapons trained on the gang leader. "Drop to your knees, hands on your head." The sheriff barked for a moment. It seemed like Draven might resist, but the look in Elias's eyes told him there was no point. Slowly he complied, his hands trembling as he knelt on the ground. The last of the Shadow Reapers were rounded up and loaded into the back of patrol cars, their defiance replaced by sullen resignation. The warehouse, once filled with the gang's chaotic energy, now stood eerily quiet, the flickering bonfire reduced to glowing embers. Elias stood near the sheriff's car, his breathing heavy, but controlled. He watched as Draven was cuffed and shoved into the back of a cruiser, his fiery gaze now dulled with defeat. "You did good," the sheriff said. Walking up beside Elias, most people wouldn't have stood a chance against that lot. Elias shook his head. "It's not about being good, it's about doing what has to be done." The sheriff studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Well, Hollow Pines owes you one. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me." As the convoy of patrol cars pulled away, Elias took a deep breath, the tension in his chest finally beginning to ease. He turned back toward the gas station where Mia and Hiram waited under the soft glow of the porch light. When Elias stepped inside, Mira rushed to him, her arms wrapping tightly around his waist. "Dad, you're okay," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. "I told you I'd be," Elias replied softly, resting a hand on her head. "It's over now." HRA leaned against the counter, his shotgun propped beside him. "You really know how to handle yourself. Rowan, remind me." Never to get on your bad side. Elias chuckled, the sound low and tired. You've been a good friend. Hiram couldn't have done it without you. Maya stepped back, looking up at her father with wide eyes. What happens now? Do you think they'll come back? Elias shook his head. Not this time. The sheriff's got them locked up tight, and Draven won't have the pull to rebuild after this ham. Nodded in agreement. That gang's finished you mad, sure of that, for the first time in what felt like days. A sense of calm settled over the station. Mia let out a shaky laugh, wiping a tear from her cheek. I can't believe it's really over. It is. Elias said, his voice steady, and now we can finally get back to normal. In the days that followed the story of Elias Rowan, stand against the Shadow Reapers spread through Hollow Pines. The small town rallied around him and Mira, their gratitude evident in every wave and kind word. Customers stopped by the gas station not just for fuel, but to thank Elias for protecting their community. Marrera began to see her father in a new light. The man she had always known as a quiet, hard-working truck driver was so much more than that. He was a protector, a leader, and above all, her hero. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mia and Elias sat on the porch of the gas station watching the last of the day's customers drive away. Dad, Mia said, breaking the comfortable silence. Why didn't you ever tell me about your past? Elias looked out at the horizon, his expression thoughtful. Because it's not who I am anymore. I left that life behind to give you a better one. But sometimes the past has a way of catching up to us. Marrera nodded, her heart swelling with pride. Well, I'm glad you were here. I don't know what I would have done without you. Elias smiled, the lines on his face softening. You're stronger than you think, Marrera. You didn't need me to fight for you. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you already are. As the stars began to twinkle above, Mira leaned, her head on her father's shoulder, a sense of peace settling over her. The storm had passed, and for the first time in days, Hollow Pines felt like home again. As the dust settles on this unforgettable night in Hollow Pines, we're reminded of the strength that lies in family and the courage it takes to stand up against injustice. Elias Rowan wasn't just protecting his daughter or his gas station. He was protecting the values that make a community strong: loyalty, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of love. What would you do in a moment like this? Would you step forward like me, a died, or stay silent? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective could inspire someone else. Thank you for joining us on BlackQueen Fightback, where we celebrate the extraordinary strength found in ordinary lives. If this story moved you, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another powerful tale of courage and humanity. Tomorrow we have another story waiting for you that we promise will leave you inspired. Thank you for being part of the Hard Tales community, where every story reminds us of the hero inside us all.